Let's do it.
Sounds great.
This is the Trade Show's Unhinged podcast, a podcast from the Facebook group You Know You Work in Trade Shows When. This podcast centers on trade shows, live events, and experiential marketing activations in today's world. Your hosts are Todd Nall, who is the owner of Showbox Exhibits and the creator of the Facebook group You Know You Work in Trade Shows When, and Mike Morrison, Vice President of Sales for WS Display. The clock is ticking, so let's get busy and get to it, and we'll do just that after this.
Need a presenter? Your Event Audio has you covered. Closed-circuit audio equipment with turnkey operation at your trade show booth, live event, or private event. YourEventAudio.com is the place to go. DJ services, MC talent, and a whole lot more. Check out YourEventAudio.com today.
Showbox Exhibits, headquartered in Houston, Texas, where they specialize in design, fabrication, and management of your trade show displays. At Showbox, the difference starts with listening to fully understand the unique brand story that's needed. Then they create an innovative, compelling concept that reflects specific event objectives. From static trade show displays to fully custom oversized exhibits featuring multimedia graphics, Showbox brings your company's message to the masses. Showbox is a trade show, convention, and environment design agency that is full service from start to finish. They're based in Houston, Texas, but they serve worldwide. They've been creating exhibits for over 20 years. Showbox Exhibits at showboxexhibits.com. Oh, it's going to be all kinds of rock and roll. All right, everybody, what is happening? You've seen all the social media play on this. You've seen all the promotions, and now it's time to get busy on this Friday, June the 14th, 2024, with our first out of the bucket, out of the chute show. It's called Trade Shows Unhinged, and we are primarily hosting this show on a Facebook group that a lot of people, a lot of our viewers and listeners know as You Know You Work in Trade Shows When. We're going to talk more about that in just a second. If you don't know me, I'm Mike Morrison. I am the Vice President of Sales at WS Display. And on your screen there, you see my new partner in crime for our podcast, videocast world. That would be Todd Nall. Now, Todd is going to talk about himself in just a minute, but on the surface, he is the owner of Showbox Exhibits out of the Houston, Texas area, but they are worldwide with their services and do a mighty fine job of what they do there for displays. But he also is the creator and founder of the Facebook group that we're hosting on, and that is You Know You Work in Trade Shows When ... or the ellipsis, I think they call it. No, it's not the ellipsis. What do you call the ... thing, the etc. thing? What do you call it?
I call it 3 periods.
Okay, just like 3 periods of basketball. And then you go in the fourth quarter.
Or is it
So,
hockey? I don't know.
Yeah, hockey. That's right. Wrong sport. That's right. Everything else has 4. Hockey has 3, and then a fight somewhere in the middle. Man, I'm really excited about this, Todd. I'm gonna step aside, and but I am gonna ask you. Actually, no, I'm gonna introduce you a little bit more because, well, Mike, we were talking that you and I first met, golly, probably 22, 23 years ago when I was with Octanorm, and I walked into Excalibur Exhibits at the time, and it was an Octanorm service partner in the Houston area that's no longer there, but you were on their sales team, and walked in and befriended you at that point, and then we've been friends ever since. But once again, to this point, I remember when I was doing Don and Mike, I interviewed you and Chad about this particular group, this You Know You Work in Trade Shows When, which has taken off like a rocket ship. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about your ideas behind starting that and how it has developed so far.
Well, no, it was originally Chad's idea. He's like, hey, what do you we've been doing this for a long time, and we've got a lot of funny stories, and I'm sure other people do too. So why don't we just create this group, You Know You Work in Trade Shows When, and just see what happens. And I think that was 5 years before COVID, or 6 or 7 years before COVID. And then during COVID, it kind of just took off. Everyone's sitting around, looking for something to do, and it really took off during that time.
Yeah, it did. I remember because we started Don and Mike with Exhibit City News back in 17, summer of 17, and somewhere between that and probably around maybe 18, 19 is when we did the interview with you guys, and it was nowhere near where it's at now. I think your official stats show you at 13,000 plus as far as members of that group, and I think you and I had an off mic chat sometime recently where every day you have to go and weed out all the bots that are trying to get onto the group, but you have to go in. And of course, I think you've got a question qualification point of that. What percentage of those people actually answer the questions and get it right?
It's very few. So, I'll have probably 500 requests a week, and then I'll have to weed out. We might get, 70 to 80 that actually are a part of the industry. So it's very tiring, but it keeps the group at a level, quality level, I think.
That's good. That's what you want. You don't want riffraff. You want people who are actually impacted by trade shows, live events, and experiential marketing activations. And that's what this is going to be all about. This show is going to be all about. And we're really looking forward to that. As many may or may not know, I did 5.5 years with Don and Mike show from Exhibit City News, and just finished up a 1.5 year run with the Exhibitor Group. And now looking forward to having really good, strong content about our industry discussions, since I am on the supply side of the display world, and Todd comes from a different perspective where he's actually building these displays for the end users and the actual activations that are out there. So hopefully we'll have a pretty good contrast of what we can talk about, at least from our side of the industry. And we invite everyone out there to be a part of the show. And on the second half of the show, we're going to cross the ticker down there, put the email address where you can hit us up with your ideas. Maybe you'd like to come on the show and talk about some stuff. But in order to get the show rolling in our inaugural discussion, I came up with 3 points, and we'll talk about those and launch our show for this every other week podcast and video cast. So let's get started with our first topic. And this is one I've actually had on the previous show, but not getting a tremendous amount of replies that make sense, other than just, fluff. So let's see if we can't talk at it from supply side and end user side that we can talk about, Todd. And that is, how are clients making it in 2024 with the high cost of doing shows right now? And really, Todd, the high cost of everything that's out there, inflation hitting us all in the shins, right? And now they've got to be cutting some money somewhere, or they're having to reinvent themselves to make the best of their participation at these shows. So what's your initial reaction to that statement?
Well, I think holistically, we try to reduce the entire overall budget for them, because that's what they're asking for. They still want to go to these shows. They're still very important, but they really don't know how to reduce their costs. They just come to us and say, hey, our budget is lower this year, or, can you fit it within this budget? And then we do our best to fit their budget. So lately, I would say not just lately, for the past 10 years, aluminum has been, the building block of a lot of these new builds, and it's light, so it saves in drayage, because that's, of course, the biggest killer right now.
Yeah, by far, it's one of the reasons almost 9 years ago that I started at WS was to bring on aluminum extrusion, silicone edged graphics, and because everything was about a lightweight way to create a branding statement for a display at a show or an event, but a trade show specifically, as you mentioned, drayage is the killer, right? And the material handling costs are not going anywhere.
Right.
They're going to be there. They're
going up. They're definitely not going down. And they have just, they've gone up, and they've stayed there for some reason. But yeah, I think it's all about being lightweight. fabric graphics. The technology in fabric graphics right now is fantastic.
The other thing, and some of the I&D people may be able to chime in on this one as well, and that's I just talked with an interesting interview while I was at Legislative Action Day. We'll talk about that in a second, but Rachel Wimberly, some people may remember her from TSNN, was former president there. That publication is now head of M&A at Hive Group. But I asked her specifically a similar question of this nature. Where are your clients and people and your organizations? Where are they cutting money? And she's actually saying that there's still some out there. Now, you remember right after COVID, especially, carpet was cut. I mean, the traffic carpet was taken out. Booth carpet stayed, aisle carpet left. Or they did something creative, but the floor was removed. And she's saying some of that's still going on, but there's always some. I think we just had a show earlier this year you may have seen here in Atlanta called Coverings, where hanging banners were not allowed. Now, I'm not sure why that was taken down, but that did obviously cut budget for people, because hanging those signs is not a cheap thing for a exhibitor to do. And the sign itself, depending on where you're getting it, if you're not getting it from WS, you're spending a lot of money. So, there's different ways of doing that, but I definitely concur with you that the components that are making the display are a way, if you're doing it creatively. And of course, if you've got stupid money, what I call stupid money, the LED tiles are what they are right now. They're very strong. I call it the wow and pow factor. They're not really doing a whole lot of selling, but they are grabbing attention. They are pulling people in, and they get them to have a conversation based on what the media is that they're seeing on there. I was going to ask you, do you have a lot of clients that will still do their branding and their verbiage on stagnant design graphics, maybe using monitors as opposed to LED screens to save that kind of money? Are you seeing any of that traffic play?
No, I don't see clients saving money using LED panels, right? Because that's kind of a higher end budget killer. If they got the budget, they're gonna do LED screens, the panels. What I'm seeing, I'm not seeing at trade shows anymore is literature. Nobody's printing anything anymore. They're doing the QR codes. So that's saving, tons in material handling, because we've had clients send in thousands of pounds of paper,
And well, let's just say, if you're like me, my age, I'm early 60s. I'm of that generation where if I go in, I'll give you an example. If I'm going to go buy headlights at the auto store, I want to find the book that has the headlights, that has the model of the, car and the year, and I will see that model and I'll go match it up. It's what I'm used to. It's what my culture is used to. I'm not used to taking my cell phone and my camera on my phone, which I do know how to do, and walk over there, scan on, and read it on my phone. Now I'm doing it more and more every day. I am an old dog that does learn new tricks, but but we're all weaning out, right? It is a new generation. It is a technologically advanced generation that's coming up, and that's what they do, is they digitally get everything. You're exactly right.
Mm-hmm.
So that's an interesting concept. Maybe we can get viewers and listeners to chime in on what they're seeing on that. We'll put that out there and get some feedback. Our second topic, as you and I were talking off mic a minute ago, does kind of go down the political realm. Don't be worried. We're not going to talk about R's and D's and I's. We're going to talk about Legislative Action Day that we just experienced back at the end of May, just a couple of weeks ago in D.C., where approximately 130, give or take a couple or so, spoke with their representatives, their Congress people, their senators, during one of the most perplexing political years that we've ever faced. Now, I was not actually in the meetings this year for the first time. Every time I've gone up there, I've represented the Georgia delegation, and I've to visit my senators and my Congress representatives accordingly. But because of the podcast that we wrapped up with Exhibitor Group, I was actually at headquarters doing interviews. But which kind of, I guess, prompts me to ask this question. And it is more of an opinionated question. And it depends on, Todd, I think, who you're asking. If it actually is it effective? There's a lot of organizations and industries that do believe in that lobbying, that do believe in going up there. They have their own legislative action days and they schedule them all throughout the year. There are actually attorney groups up there. That's all they do is schedule legislative action days for individual industries. But I am concerned that our voices, are they really being heard? Or are there, in your opinion, bigger issues that are going on in DC at the time? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, we talked earlier about this, and there's so many different lobbyists, and I think that the main goal of our industry is to be heard, period. I know that there were other agendas on the docket that day, but during COVID, our whole industry was just forgotten. So we need to get our codes in order. We need to get recognized. We need to be funded if another disaster happens and we're all out of work again.
That is an excellent point. And I'm going to piggyback a question on that because we have come back so fast, in my opinion, or faster than I thought we would. 20 to 21 was crucial. It was brutal was the word I was looking for. It was brutal.
Yeah.
21 to 22, we saw some advancement. 22 to 23, the year of 22, okay. But 23 was just literally fast lane, 150 miles per hour, no hesitation, no time off. No, you can't have PTO. No, you can't take sick leave. We need you at a show. I mean, that was the mentality. And we probably lost some people because of that. Because human nature and the way the culture changed with that. But where the direction I was going with that is, tomorrow it could come back again. Mm-hmm. And I think you're right. I think we probably should not take for granted that 2020 happened and it's like 9/11, chances of it happening again are slim to none. Chances that the fallout will happen again, probably not. We know better. But something else can creep up here and could cause it to happen again.
Mm-hmm. And we need to be in order before that happens,
Good point. Good point. I think that's important. I do believe in it. I do believe that, it's only 130 folks who could attribute the time to go up and in positions that they can go up and have that opportunity to participate. But it's not just a one-day deal. I think you also have to stay on top of legislation, stay on top of your representatives, and be a part of the process where the sausage is made, as they say, in DC. And even though it is a political year and a divisive country setting that we're in right now, we have to look out for our industry and we have to look out for where things are going. Of course, our two asks were the visa wait times to be improved and Pell Grant and 529 monies to be used for trade training instead of just your typical 4-year degrees, which I think is huge for our industry because the labor side is aging out. It has a tremendously older average of age of upper 50s, and we need to be bringing in people, Todd, I think you would agree, that are trained and that can come in our industry and be positive influences on our industry moving forward.
100%. Right now, our biggest challenge is hiring experienced people from this industry because so many have left. So that's our biggest challenge right now. We are bringing in new talent that wants to learn about the business, but we're not trainers. We are swimming down this stream, and we want you to jump in with us and swim with us. But now we have to take the time and train up these new employees. So it's kind of it's a weird phenomenon since COVID, for sure. Now, tell me on these legislation days, are you seeing any results from these legislation days?
Great question. You're not going. How can I sum this up? You're not going to see, rarely, that specific ask get answered as a one-all be-all solution.
Okay.
what will happen, and this is like any other legislation is out there, right? I've learned this in my mere amount of time that I've done this, is it gets packaged in with a lot of other things, you know. Well,
Yeah.
I'll give you this if you'll give me that. It's strictly negotiating, right?
Mm.
It's all negotiating. There's
It's
power play.
politics.
It's politics.
It's
And that's,
politics.
so if you can, and I said this back in Don and Mike days. I'm not a good person to go up there because I had some pretty warped mindset about DC, about how crooked everything
Sure.
is, how everybody is, this, that, and the other. I won't go down that road, but R's, D's, and I's, all of them are guilty. It was my take on it, but it's just what it is. The machine is so big that if you want to advance the cause, you've got to accept the fact that sometimes you got to give a little to get a little. Right. And that's DC in a nutshell. That should be their slogan, Washington, D.C., give a little, get a little. I mean, that's kind of how it is. And when you learn that and you learn to accept that, then life goes a little better with that.
Yeah. We need to fix some things. Otherwise, robots are going to take over, right?
Nice segue. Oh, he's learning. It's like you never do another podcast. But by the way, Todd does a Formula One podcast with some buddies of yours.
It's just a race car podcast.
Race car talk. Yeah.
Just race car talk. Yeah.
The guy, you drive the souped up vehicles 100 and 200 miles an hour, and planes. That's about as close as I get to that. Not my game. Too tight, too fast, too tight, and too enclosed. But nice segue into our final talking point before we take a break and come back to wrap things up. And that is, and actually this one was submitted by a gentleman who just came to work, just hired with my company at WS. He's our newest Southeast Regional Sales Manager who will be handling Southeastern states for WS, a gentleman by the name of, his name is Vince Vaughn.
Oh, yeah?
Yes, his name is Vince Vaughn.
Beautiful babies.
Yeah,
Vegas, baby, Vegas.
We went to lunch on this past Sunday, and I told him, I said, I'm gonna nickname you Dodgeball from this point forward. It's gonna be your name. And but before I call you that,
we could go so many ways. We could so many places with that name.
Well, it's Couples Retreat. There's how many other movies are there that's with Vince Vaughn? But Vince actually brings 17 plus years of experience from the I&D side. Labor, carpenters union, all kind of that type of background, which I liked a lot because I can speak intelligently with him. But he brought up a good point, and I think it's a good one to discuss, especially with the I&D side of our listenership, and that is a SWOT analysis. We'll talk about that acronym in a second, of robotics and AI in the trade show industry, and the question of how will individuals and companies increase their profits by utilizing just these two components, both being right at the top of their game. Now, if you're not familiar with the acronym of SWOT, SWOT, it's strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And I'll let you give me your ideas on that topic first.
You know what? As a trade show business builder owner, the first thing I'm going to think of is, I wonder if I could just ask AI, hey, design a 20 by 20 for me. Design a 20 by 20 with a hanging sign in the meeting area. Of course, my booth designers are going to be mad at me for saying that, but I mean, it's legit, right? You can have AI describe an exhibit for you. You can have AI do so many things right now.
You can. And as we were off mic mentioning that a minute ago, and as a matter of fact, I've got Alexa right here in front of my face, and she's spinning around as I'm talking.
Her head is spinning.
It's so, all the lights are going crazy, like it's a disco or something. And it very much was distracting. But two things come to mind, and I mentioned them off mic a minute ago. Let's go all the way back to 2020. Summer of 2020 is July of 2020, actually. So right at 4 years ago, we had a show in Orlando. It's called Together Again Expo.
Oh, yeah. I was there.
Trucks. Yeah, you were there. I was there. We actually exhibited there and had a 10 by 20 to share. We could have these trade shows. We just got to be careful about it. That was the whole crux of the idea, right?
Yep.
But what was interesting was a company out of Australia who showed up that was like a couple of aisles over from me. That was my first introduction to a trade show floor striping machine or taping machine. And
Oh,
what they would do, it was a big, like, look like a cleaner that you go around and clean the high school floors with or something, mall floors. But
like a lining Zamboni.
exactly, a lining Zamboni. That's a good analogy of what it looked like, because you would program it and put the key, I'm assuming somehow or another, into that machine, and it would go around, stripe the floor in place of people doing that. And
So it was marking out booth spaces and inline
yes,
spaces?
and the floor and the aisles and
Wow.
everything, where your receptions would be, your
Mhm.
concessions, everything, whatever you
Wow.
needed striped for, carpet, for instance, obviously
Sure.
carpet. And of course, at that point, how we found out
Carpet.
was important. I
There
know
was no
with
carpet at that show.
the show, and there was none for a while. Actually, our friends at Brewmark were screaming and yelling at
Yeah.
people. Inside Track and a couple others I can name that were not happy about that. But I do remember that was our introduction to that. Now you see all kind of GCs with those machines out there by the dozens, really going to big shows and striping. So robotics have already been in the game for some time. AI comes in as another game. Okay.
Right.
And to be honest with you, off mic, I was mentioning I've got to do a regional sales managers training seminar coming up in about 3 weeks. And I'm like, man, I need to come up with a solution. And I go to Chat GPT and go, hey, can you shoot me out a 4-day outline of a regional sales managers meeting outline? Boom, there it is. I mean, now I had to go tweak it, of course, and I had to make it applicable to what I needed to talk about. But the talking points were right there. And I'm like, okay, this has some legs. This AI stuff saves my day and saves my tail a lot. Emails, proposals, follow-ups, everything that I can save time with. And that's the benefit, right? The strength is saving time. The weaknesses, you may have to tweak it a little bit. Opportunities are plethora, and there's tons. Threats, we know what they are, and I can't talk about them on the show because it's all political. But and I guess you could say intellectual rights. Let's just call it that. There's that concern, but it ain't going nowhere. In my Southern Montgomery, Alabama accent, it's not going anywhere. These types of things are going to be there. I think you may have to do some transitioning to like Vince is. He's leaving the labor side, he's coming over to the lack of better words, the white collar side of our industry. He's going to be able to take that knowledge that he earned over 17 years and put it into teaching, custom exhibit houses how to do things bigger and better with a WS. So I think that's what you do is if you're threatened by technology and AI and robotics and those types of things, that maybe you change your game. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, he's a smart guy. I mean, I think that, this move, this pivot for him in the industry is going to serve him well,
Absolutely. Absolutely. We talked about a lot. Let's take a real quick break. We'll come back and wrap things up right after this. From light boxes, towers, counters, and back walls to turnkey custom exhibits, WS Display is your partner in providing quality displays at extremely aggressive pricing to fit any reseller's budget. Make more profit by teaming up with WS. With a team of experts to assist with estimates, renderings, and CAD, to fulfillment, setup, and test fitting, quality photo proofs, and complete project handling from our East Coast, West Coast, and Pacific fulfillment facilities. We can be your partner today. Hit me up at mike@wsdisplay.com for more information. I know that was a lot of information to go over there. We're glad you stuck out with us and took in this inaugural show. And we'll refine some things and change it up a bit. Hopefully we'll have a guest come on our next show. Maybe you'd like to be that guest. Maybe you have a voice that you'd like to have heard within the industries of trade shows, live events, experiential marketing. Why not? We've got an opening. We got a seat right.
Let's get some feedback.
Let's get feedback. Absolutely. And the feedback is and you see it across the ticker at the bottom, Trade Shows Unhinged, all one word, at gmail.com. We made it very simple that you can send us an email. You can also respond to us on the social media platforms where you're seeing this podcast or you're listening to us on the podcast form as well. We appreciate all of the support, and we want to take this, Todd, and run with it and make it a voice that really echoes and continues the great work that you've done with, you work in trade shows. I applaud you for that, because it takes a lot to manage that type of thing. I would have 86'd it a long time ago. I'm too lazy and too old.
Talk about 13,000 different personalities, right?
Oh yeah. I mean, how can you have a conversation with them, that many? Well, we just did. We used electronics to forward that information. We're also on, as you can tell, social media, LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, and other locations that will be promoting this show. So hit us up. Let us know what you think and what we should talk about primarily. And once again, if you want to be a guest on the show, we can have multiple guests. We can do little segments of the show. We can do all kinds of things. I'm sure
there's lots of people I'd like to talk to.
Yeah, Todd wants to talk to you right here on Trade Shows Unhinged.